So the big report is finally here, the preliminary assessment of the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Office of the Director of National Intelligence Unclassified Report, 25th of June 2021. I've looked at the report, gone through it a couple of times, but what I want to do now is go through it again and kind of give my take on it. Now, long story short, I'm fairly happy with the report. I think it kind of more or less says what I've been saying for a long time, that there's a bunch of different things, we don't have enough information, there's always going to be things that are unidentified, there are things like birds and balloons that are going to show up on sensors, and we should try to figure out what these things are. And, no evidence of aliens, no great evidence of amazing technology. But not everyone agrees with that assessment, so what I want to do is go through the report and try to explain what I see in the report and what justifies that assessment. Okay, so page 2, scope and assumptions. This basically tells us who does the report and where they got all the information from. The only important thing on this page really is this assumption at the end. It says, various forms of sensors that register UAP generally operate correctly and capture enough real data to allow initial assessments. But some UAP may be attributable to sensor anomalies. Basically, that means that most of the time the radar works and the ATFLIR system works, but sometimes it does not. And when it does not, that may create a report of a UAP. Next page. Page 3, the executive summary. Now, this is kind of the important page. It has all the most important information and conclusions. And some of the later stuff, even though it should be more detailed, actually omits some of the stuff that was listed here. So you really need to refer to this page whenever you look at something that comes later in the report. Okay, executive summary. The limited amount of high-quality reporting on unidentified aerial phenomena hampers our ability to draw firm conclusions about the nature or intent of UAP. So they're basically saying they don't have enough information to know what the nature of the problem is, or if the UAP means something. I'm not sure what that really means, like aliens meaning something. Okay, the UAP task force considered a range of information on UAP described in US military and intelligence community reporting, but because the reporting lacked sufficient specificity, ultimately recognized that a unique tailored reporting process was required to provide sufficient data for analysis of UAP events. As a result, the UAPTF concentrated its review on reports that occurred between 2004 and 2021, which is basically meaning they started with the Nimitz encounter and went up to the present day. The majority of which are the result of this new tailored process to better capture UAP events through formalized reporting, which is good. That means that the majority of the reports here are actually quite high quality, where they've standardized how the reports were taken. Now, this is an interesting point. Most of the UAP reported probably do represent physical objects, given that a majority of UAP were registered across multiple sensors to include radar, infrared, electro-optical, weapon seekers, and visual observations. Now, this most of the UAP reported actually is 80. It's 80 out of 144, which is 56%, which is a bit more than half. So I think saying most of is perhaps a bit of an exaggeration, because that means that a bit less than half of them were not registered across multiple sensors. They were just registered on one sensor, or they were just an eyewitness account. So we could perhaps say that more than half of the UAP reported probably do represent physical objects. Now, again, in the very important paragraph here, in a limited number of incidents, UAP reportedly appeared to exhibit unusual flight characteristics. Now, that's, the money there, and that's, are these alien spaceships or advanced technology from other countries? They continue, these observations could be the result of sensor errors, spoofing, or observer misperceptions and require additional rigorous analysis. So basically they're saying that there are situations that seem to be amazing, but they can't tell if they actually are. They can't tell if they are, in fact, sensor errors, spoofing, or observer misperceptions. Now, compare that to the previous paragraph, where most of them actually represent physical objects because they were on multiple sensors. I think it's pretty clear that these ones that they're talking about, the UAP that reportedly appear to exhibit unusual flight characteristics, are not included in those probably physical objects, because if they were registered on multiple sensors, that would prove pretty much without the shadow of a doubt that they were in fact exhibiting unusual flight characteristics. So it seems fairly likely that this paragraph refers to things that were essentially single sensor or single eyewitness account reports. It's not entirely clear, but it would seem to be that way for if you combine the information in these two paragraphs. There are probably multiple types of UAP requiring different explanations based on the range of appearances and behaviors described in the available reporting. Well, yes. This is true, and this is something I've been saying for months, if not years, in that we don't just have one thing. We don't just have UAPs. What are they? We have, here's a UAP report, here's a different one, here's another one, here's another one. There could be all kinds of different explanations. And they've categorized them into five broad categories, 5 potential explanatory categories: airborne clutter, natural atmospheric phenomena, US development programs, foreign adversary systems, and a catch-all other bin. UAP clearly pose a safety of flight issue and may pose a challenge to US national security. And that's obviously something that's very important, and hence we need to look into what these UAP actually are, these various different UAP. Safety concerns primarily center on aviators contending with an increasingly cluttered air domain, which really is the first of the 5 categories, the airborne clutter. UAPs would also represent a national security challenge if they are foreign adversary collection platforms. Those are spy things. I mean, they're really talking about spy drones there, for example, or balloons. Or provide evidence a potential adversary has developed either a breakthrough or disruptive technology. That's if they do actually, in fact, demonstrate unusual flight characteristics, which we can't say for sure because we don't have enough sensor data. And then they talk about consolidation of reports across the government, standardized reporting, etc. would be better. And that some of these steps are resource intensive and would require additional investment. So that's just a call for more money for the UAP task force, which may well be justified, but that's what that paragraph is about. Needs more data, might need more money. Next page. Available reporting largely inconclusive. Limited data leaves most UAP unexplained. There's the thing. We don't know what we're looking at. We've got inconsistent data, we've got limited data, and this is a problem. There's no standard reporting methods, lots of anecdotes. They focused on the more recent ones, the majority coming in the last 2 years, which is great because, again, these are better quality ones. They're not simply the ones that are limited by the previous reporting process. We were able to identify one reported UAP with high confidence. Well, that's rather a low number of solved cases. But again, the reason that UAPs are UAPs is that we don't have enough information. And it's quite often difficult to get more information. So it's not surprising that if something is unidentified once, it stays unidentified. The videos that I've looked at, I've not identified what the things are. I've just identified various characteristics of them that aren't exactly what people say. The gimbal not actually rotating, the go fast video not actually going fast, the triangle not actually being a triangle, that type of thing. But it doesn't mean I've identified them. So they're still unidentified. Okay, in one case we identified the object as a large deflating balloon. I don't know what that is. It could be the go fast. If it's like a slowly leaking balloon, it will eventually achieve neutral buoyancy, and that will mean it will stay at a certain altitude for a period of time, just slowly drift down as it continues to leak. So that could be One of the cases, the Go Fast, it could actually be the Omaha Sphere that was descending into the water, but that doesn't really look like a balloon. But it would be nice to know which case they were actually talking about. The others remain unexplained. 144 reports originated from the US government sources. Of these, 80 reports involved observations with multiple sensors. So that's, again, 56%, 80 out of 144, which means that 64 of them do not. 64 of them were, in fact, just observations from either one sensor or one eyewitness. And most reports described UAP as objects that interrupted pre-planned training or other military activities. Well, that's kind of interesting. All right, so UAP collection challenges, and they talk about the stigmas that presumably during the last couple of years that will be partially mitigated by having this standardized reporting and this encouraging of reporting. And since the majority of the reports are in the last 2 years, then the stigma should have less of an effect on this particular data set. Let's see. The sensors mounted on US military platforms are typically designed to fulfill specific missions. As a result, those sensors are not generally suited for identifying UAP. Part of what they're talking about here might be the ATFLIR system, which is this infrared camera system that's on a lot of Navy planes. And the ATFLIR system is a targeting pod. It is designed to target things. It's not designed for looking at strange objects and figuring out what they are. It's designed to get a high contrast lock, visual lock on an object so it can be tracked, which doesn't mean it necessarily has the best visual look from a human's perspective. It's designed for something that that missiles can lock onto. So the camera can lock onto it, and then you tag it with the laser locks onto it, and then blows it up. So designed for one use means that other uses such as identification might be a bit challenging. And again, this may be the case with radar, in that it is designed to identify a specific type of thing, which would be enemy planes, enemy missiles. And if something is an odd shape, like a balloon, it might not even show up. It might be filtered out, or it might just give very intermittent results or something like that. All right, the next, this is kind of a curiously worded thing. Sensor vantage points and the number of sensors concurrently observing an object plays substantial roles in distinguishing UAP from known objects and determining whether a UAP demonstrates breakthrough aerospace capabilities. Now, this again is something I've been saying a lot in slightly better words. Basically, triangulation. You either want to have two videos showing the same thing from different positions, so you can figure out what's actually going on from 3D, or you can have a video and radar of the same thing. Now, if both sensor sets show this amazing movement, that means the amazing movement is almost certainly real. So if we do not have this correct number of sensors observing these things that appear to move amazingly, then we're not going to be able to determine if they do. And I think, again, what's going on here is in the cases where things appear to move in an amazing manner, defy unusual characteristics, we only have one source of data. Because if we had more than one, we would be able to definitively say that this was moving amazingly. And like they say here, if we don't, then we wouldn't be able to. And they distinguish between optical sensors, have the benefit of providing some insight into relative size, shape, and structure, meaning you can see the thing, you get a picture of it. Like you have these photos of things that look like balloons, the Batman balloon, and in the Nimitz encounter you have both TV mode and IR mode, which means that you have a picture of it in invisible light, and you have a picture of it in infrared. Unfortunately, both of them appear to be very out of focus, so you can't really tell very much in that particular case. Radio frequency sensors provide more accurate velocity and range information because you can use radar, this is what they're talking about, radar, mostly radar, to measure how far something away is, time of flight of the radar signal, and the Doppler effect tells you, how it's moving and stuff like that. And just basically the 3D positioning will allow you to track its velocity and its heading, its aspect. Page 5. But some potential patterns do emerge. Now, this is a funny paragraph. It says some potential patterns do emerge, and then it basically debunks the entire thing. It says, although there was wide variability in the reports, and the dataset is currently too limited to allow for detailed trend or pattern analysis, there was some clustering of UAP observations regarding shape, size, and particularly propulsion. UAP sightings also tended to cluster around US training and testing grounds. But we assess that this, meaning just the clustering around US training and testing grounds, we assess that this may result from a collection bias as a result of focused attention, greater numbers of latest generation sensors operating in those areas, meaning those areas have better radar and night vision and whatnot, unit expectations, meaning there's lots of people on patrol looking for things, and guidance to report anomalies, meaning if you see something, say something. So, two things there. There is the clustering of size, shape, and particularly propulsion, but they preface that by saying they didn't really have enough data points to make that assessment. And then this clustering around US training and testing ground. Now, this also applies to another thing they don't mention here, which is nuclear. We have all these reports from years ago of UFO turning off nuclear missiles and UFOs clustering around nuclear sites. But again, we get the same bias here, this collection bias, which is a real thing. It's not just a made-up term here. Collection bias is where you don't collect all of the data. You're just focusing on a subset of the data for some particular reason. It's a result of focused attention and greater numbers of sensors around these areas and unit expectations and guidance. You know, the guards around a nuclear site will be instructed to report things in the sky because, you know, obviously it's a security concern. And the same thing with this here. So anyway, basically, potential patterns do emerge, but they don't mean anything. A handful of UAP appear to demonstrate advanced technology. In 18 incidents described in 21 reports, which I'm guessing means that, what would that be? 3 of the incidents had 2 people, or perhaps just one of the incidents had 4 people, because they could have had 18 incidents, 4 reports on the 18th. That would give you 21 total reports, or would that be 3? But anyway, not very many additional people are required to go from 18 to 21. Observers report unusual UAP movement patterns or flight characteristics. Now, here we have observers report, and that kind of implies to me that it's all eyewitness accounts and no actual radar. Could be observers of the radar, but then don't they have the radar data? Wouldn't we be able to see the data? So it seems here again, we're getting a single source. Not only that, it's not even an instrument. We're getting eyewitness accounts reporting unusual UAP movement patterns or flight characteristics. And then they describe them. Some appear to remain stationary in winds, move against the wind, maneuver abruptly, move at considerable speed without discernible means of propulsion. And in a small number of cases, military aircraft systems process radio frequency energy associated with UAP sightings. So that's basically where they measure the RF coming from something, the RF signal, like it's broadcasting things or what kind of radar it's putting out, something like that. But they process it, or I don't know what that means. The UAPTF holds a small amount of data that appear to show UAP demonstrating acceleration or a degree of signature management. Additional rigorous analysis are necessary by multiple teams or groups of technical experts to determine the nature and validity of these data. So that means that things appear to show something, but they don't really know if they do, so we should look to see if they actually do. We are conducting further analysis to determine if breakthrough technologies were demonstrated. See, now this is kind of like a key part of the report. They don't know if breakthrough technologies were demonstrated. And a lot of people who are supporting this investigation of UAPs are essentially saying that breakthrough technologies have been demonstrated. Like they're saying there are things in the sky that are running rings around our pilots. They are doing things that we cannot duplicate, and either we've been leapfrogged by another power or there are aliens or something like that up there. And they don't give you any other options. But this report basically says they don't know. There's a small amount of data that appears to show UAP demonstrating these things, and rigorous analysis will be needed to determine the nature and validity of this data. And further analysis is being conducted. Maybe in the next report we'll get more answers. So next, UAP probably lack a single explanation. This is again, the big thing. I've said over and over again that there's lots of different things going on here, and you can't just say UAPs are the problem. Let's figure out what UAPs are. There's all kinds of different things. There's drones, there's balloons and birds, there's all kinds of things. Let's see what they say. The UAP documented in this limited data set, it's only 144 things, demonstrates an array of aerial behaviors. Even though we've only got 104, we've got all these different things, reinforcing the possibility that there are multiple types of UAP requiring different explanations. Our analysis of the data supports the construct that if and when individual UAP incidents are resolved, they will fall into one of 5 potential explanatory categories: airborne clutter, natural atmospheric phenomena, USG or industry development programs, foreign adversary systems, and a catch-all other bin. With the exception of one instance where we determined with high confidence that the reported UAP was airborne clutter, specifically a deflated balloon, we currently lack sufficient information in our dataset to attribute incidents to specific explanations. This basically means they don't have high confidence in any specific explanation. And they do have it in one case, but not in the other ones, apparently, which is kind of interesting. Okay, so the 5 categories, they break them down. The first one, I think they're listing these essentially in order of probability. Like, I like to do, put the most likely thing first. Number 1, airborne clutter. These objects include birds, balloons, recreational unmanned aerial vehicles, UAV, drones basically, or airborne debris like plastic bags that muddle a scene and affect an operator's ability to identify true targets, such as enemy aircraft. Things like plastic bags sometimes get blown up in the air. One of the things that people reported seeing was a cube inside a beach ball, cube inside a sphere, which is actually something that exists as a radar reflector on boats and could theoretically, like a plastic bag, if the wind is sufficiently strong, be blown up into the air. So there's all these things: birds, balloons, recreational unmanned aerial vehicles, drones, or airborne debris like plastic bags. And these are all things that have been brought up before as possible explanations for a wide variety of UAPs. Natural atmospheric phenomena. This is one of my favorite little topics. Natural atmospheric phenomena include ice crystals, moisture, and thermal fluctuations that may register on some infrared or radar systems. Now, the first one, ice crystals, is interesting because I think people mistake it as there being a giant chunk of ice in the sky. I think this is something that the Nimitz encounter had this problem. People think that ice crystals means crystals of ice, like a big slab of ice that you get from the supermarket. But no, ice crystals just means things like cirrus cloud, high altitude clouds that are made of ice crystals, essentially, very fine ice dust. And you get reflections off that in the same way that you get atmospheric halos and sundogs and things like that from the light refracting from them. You can also get them bending light and reflecting light, like up, down to the ground, and the radar will give you a false return. And it's possible you might even get something on the IR from that if you've got a cloud ahead of you, because clouds are warmer than the background radiation of the sky. They can actually appear as hot objects if you have no context other than the sky. Let's see. Ice crystals, moisture, and thermal fluctuations that may register on some infrared and radar systems. Thermal fluctuations. I guess that's a temperature inversion. And what happens there is that the air normally gets colder as you get higher up. But if there's part of it where you get a layer of warm air on top of cold air, you can get the light or the radiation will bend down towards the colder air, because it's even more dense than normal, so you'll get more. You almost get these reflections off this temperature inversion. Or you can get a thing called ducting, where the light or the radar will bounce along this kind of atmospheric duct and can go a long way and give you all these weird returns. And of course, clouds can give you strange returns as well. Okay, USG, US government, or industry development programs. Some UAP observations could be attributable to development and classified programs by US entities. We were unable to confirm, however, that these systems accounted for any of the UAP reports we collected, which is kind of interesting. Why would they be unable to confirm? But they still suspect it might be the case. They've not ruled it out. So were they just unable to get into all the secret programs that were there because they didn't have sufficient classification, or did people just not want to cooperate with them? It's not really clear. But they specifically say they were unable to confirm it, which contrasts with the next possibility, foreign adversary systems. Some UAP may be technologies deployed by China, Russia, another nation, or a non-governmental entity, like, I guess terrorists, something like that. But they don't say they were unable to confirm or rule out that either, so they just leave that hanging, so it's a possibility. And finally, we have the other category. Although most of the UAP described in our dataset probably remain unidentified due to limited data or challenges of collection, processing, or analysis, we may require additional scientific knowledge to successfully collect on, analyze, and characterize some of them. We could group sub-objects in this category pending scientific advances that allow us to better understand them. The UAPTF intends to focus additional analysis on the small number of cases where a UAP appears to display unusual flight characteristics or signature management. Signature management, I think, is just stealth capabilities, like low observability in radar, and you get this jittering effect on the radar. They don't know, though, if that's an actual thing or if it's just an artifact of the collection system. So they're saying that perhaps science will advance. So in the future, we may, in fact, perhaps be able to analyze these existing cases, or perhaps analyze the same type of case better in the future. Like we will get better radar, or we will get better long distance systems, or we will have multiple cameras, or something like that. Things will improve in the future. They're basically saying that we might be able to figure these things out in the future. UAP threaten flight safety and possibly national security. Sounds ominous. UAPs pose a hazard to safety of flight and could pose a broader danger if some instances represent sophisticated collection against US military activities by a foreign government or demonstrate a breakthrough aerospace technology by a potential adversary. I think, again, here we've got to go back to the executive summary on the first page. We're on page 6 now. So we go back to executive summary, and it says, UAP clearly pose a safety of flight issue and may pose a challenge to national security. But it says, safety concerns primarily center on aviators contending with an increasingly cluttered air domain. They put this in the executive summary, but they don't really say it quite so clearly in page 6. Let's see, when aviators encounter safety hazards, they are required to report these concerns, blah, blah, blah. They may cease their tests. So this is like saying basically, if a pilot sees something, they might not want us to report it because then they would have to return to base because there's a possible danger, so they just ignore it, which hopefully the new guidelines is kind of encouraging pilots not to do that in the future. But we also have UAP Task Force has 11 reports of documented instances in which pilots reported near misses with a UAP. And remember, a lot of what they talked about, the very first things are things like birds, balloons, plastic bags, debris in the air, things like that. Cluttered airspace, drones. And, obviously all those things are a problem. And those might be some of the 11 reports. Not that many, really, 11 out of 144. Potential national security challenges. I guess this is kind of a big, important thing. We currently lack data to indicate any UAP are part of a foreign collection program. This is a spying program. Or indicative of a major technological advancement by a potential adversary. We continue to monitor for evidence of such programs, blah, blah, blah. And particularly they're detected near military facilities. Yeah, so basically, if they were foreign adversaries, some of these cases, a small number of them, even if it was just one, obviously it's a problem and it should be solved. But they don't have any data. We currently lack any data to indicate any UAP part of a foreign collection program or indicative of a major technological advancement by a potential adversary. Yeah, we currently lack data. Okay, explaining UAP will require analytical, collection, and resource investment. This is kind of like the we need more money. The UAP task force needs more money, or if we want to solve this thing, we need to put money into data collection in general across the board. So they're saying standardized things. They're talking about employing artificial intelligence, which would be great. They can filter out cases. Yeah, it'd be really good if you could actually use AI to take in a very large number of data sets. And the problem with UFO reporting historically has been that we get so much noise. Especially when there's a UFO flap like there is right now, you get thousands of people reporting UFOs. And the vast majority of them, obviously, if not all of them, are fairly ordinary objects. Yet we want to find the things that actually are extraordinary. If there's a foreign adversary trying to sneak drones in, we want to be able to detect that particular thing, and we need to filter out all the noise to do that. And this is one of the reasons back in the 1950s the government encouraged the debunking of UFOs, because all the reports that were coming in were taking up too much time for the authorities to track down these essentially false reports of just nonsense noise. But now we have the opportunity to allow all that noise in. We just open the floodgates and say, yes, send us all your UAP reports. And then we have AI look at the reports, and the AI will determine if any of them don't fit the normal patterns of things like birds and balloons and plastic bags and drones. And those will get bumped up to more consideration, to human analysis. So that's a good idea. And they developed interagency analytical and processing workflows to ensure collection analysis will be well informed and coordinated. Sounds great. Okay, efforts to standardize reporting, jolly good. Working to acquire additional reporting, including from the US Air Force, because most of it's come from the Navy. It seems to be some kind of cultural difference between the Navy and the Air Force. Perhaps there's more reports over the ocean for a variety of reasons. Perhaps it's just easier to spot them against the ocean, perhaps. I don't know. Or perhaps the Air Force doesn't like to report these things. But anyway, we're trying to improve that. And then the FAA. FAA, of course, has radar running all the time, covering the entire country. And if there was UFOs, UAPs showing up on that radar, it would be in the data. So it would be good to get the data from them and analyze it using AI. It would be great. You could historically look at all the historical data and use some AI to find things that were weird. All right, so let's see. The UAP task force is looking for novel ways to increase collection of UAP cluster areas, where US forces are not present, as a way to baseline standard UAP activity and mitigate the collection bias in the data set. So that's saying basically we will study UAPs extensively in an area that's not of security concern. So we'll go out into, some town in Kansas that does not have a military base near it, and we'll set up cameras to study UAPs in the sky, and we'll use that to compare against the results of all the cameras and the radars from an actual military base. So we'll get this baseline reading of UAP activity from all the false positives, things like birds and drones and whatnot, and then we'll be able to kind of subtract that from the data that we get from an actual military site, and then we'll be able to see if there are things that stand out, which are actual security threats. Good idea. Good idea, UAP task force. And one proposal is to use advanced algorithms to search historical data captured and stored by radar. That's what I just said. Okay, increased investment in research and development. The UAP task force has indicated that additional funding for research and development could further the future study of the topics laid out in this report. Such investments should be guided by a UAP collection strategy, UAP R&D technical roadmap, and a UAP program plan. I wonder if those things are coming. This is a preliminary report, and I think that's pretty much the last page of it. There's a couple of appendices, but that's it. This is essentially a 7-page report. and it's interesting because I wasn't expecting it to be exactly like this. I was expecting more of a list of actual cases. I'm quite happy with it, though. I think it gives a good overview of the situation that we have. I think it gives a good overview of the fact that we have very limited information. We don't have very good data sets and data points that indicate some kind of advanced technology, some kind of leapfrogging of technology. We have lots of things where things are unidentified and we need to figure out how to identify them. We have these limitations of technology, or perhaps limitations of personnel. They talk about particular things that, let's see, we go back to this executive summary where UAPs do report unusual flight characteristics. The observations could be the result of sensor errors, spoofing, observer misperceptions, and these require additional rigorous analysis. Now, of course, spoofing is a security threat. Sensor errors is a security threat too, but it's not like an aggressive security threat from outside. It's just something that we need to improve our sensors. Spoofing, if that means that a foreign adversary is faking these results, that's something that's essentially an attack and something that needs to be handled very seriously. Observer misperceptions also is an issue. If the observers, the pilots, are getting things wrong, then we need to figure out why that happens and improve practices and trainings and reporting analysis to incorporate that information. So there's lots of real issues that have been identified in this report that need to be addressed. If something's unidentified, let's figure out how to identify it. But we don't have evidence of advanced technology. We have things that possibly indicate it, but more study is needed. And they never mentioned aliens. So it's not even really a consideration there. They were tentatively saying maybe a foreign adversary might have leapfrogged us, but that's only a few little cases, and we don't really have multiple sensor data there, except maybe in one or two cases with this radio frequency stuff that we measured. But not a lot going on. Just unidentified flying objects.